So very good. So tonight what we'll do is we will first speak about some philosophical questions so as to understand, well, what the human person is, how the human person functions, how the human person was meant to be in the original plan of God, and therefore we will open the Bible, how the human person was, so to say, before what we call the fall of man, before, nasty word, original sin, before men discovered the capacity of choosing wrong, when everything was good, so to say. It's important to understand that so as to understand where to turn to and what direction to choose. So it's on the one side philosophy, and on the other side it's also theology, because we open the Bible and we believe that the Bible is not just a book of nice stories, but it's actually a book that reveals truth on God and on man mainly. And I will speak about this right away. Why is this important? Because sometimes we react differently than we would like to. Sometimes, for example, we would like to stay calm and we explode. Or sometimes we should explode and we don't say anything. Sometimes we would like to be nice and kind and we can say harsh words, and afterwards we feel super sorry and say, how is this possible? Sometimes we choose wrong means because we're tired or we're angry or we're sad or we're hungry and suddenly do very silly things. Sometimes we choose wrong means for the right goals or the right means for the wrong goals. Sometimes, and in your case now, you want to get married and maybe think, yeah, that's easy or more or less easy, and maybe don't realize, how to set up our troops so as to be sure that we have the tools and the means that we need so as to live a lifelong together. So therefore, it's good to look at the human person in history, so to say, and understand why sometimes the human person doesn't function completely as it's meant to be, and as we know it should probably be. And then we will try to see how God answers to this reality of sometimes brokenness or confusion in us. And you will realize that there are real answers to real questions. And when you're kids and when you're young, you sometimes learn catechism and it sometimes remains in childhood and doesn't necessarily develop into adult life. And so it still answers the questions that we had as children, but it doesn't necessarily answer the questions that we have as adults. And sometimes we feel as if our faith or our knowledge of faith is like having two small shoes, right? That we were wearing when we were 7 years old or 8 or 12, but now we are between, almost 30 plus minus. And we need bigger shoes as to walk in, and we don't need, when you're kids and you want to swim, you have these things around your arms, right? They're normally flashing red so that you can be found. But when you weigh 80 kilos as a big guy, or whatever, as a girl, I have no idea what girls weigh, then this doesn't help you. You need something bigger to float on. So basically your faith and your knowledge has to grow. And faith is not just believing things and not thinking. It's very important for us. You are adults that live in an adult world where constantly the world tells us what is true and what is bad and what is good. And in our period now, the ministries and the governments tell us what is good for us, as if we were not able to think, what is good for us. So sometimes we do not think too much and we just act, But in certain things, we're actually able to think. We have a reason, we have a conscience, we have intelligence, we have a heart, we have a common sense. And if we use it well, we don't need neither a state nor a church to tell us what to do. Okay, the state and the church are necessary so as to remind us who we are when we forget who we are and act like not humans or act like not children of God, okay? Good. So, yeah, so this is important for us so as to, understand ourselves and also understand that we live together with a person and you will live for the rest of your life together with a person that is also wounded inside, that there's something inside that doesn't work perfectly. And so that we know when I live with that person, I don't get angry with that person if the person sometimes reacts weird, but that at least I know why this is the case. Okay, and that I decide to get married to a person that is not normal according to the original plan of the creator, but it is abnormal because sometimes this person next to me will react wrong, will think wrong, will believe what is true that is actually not true. And this is just going to happen, right? And it has maybe already happened many times, right? Yeah. Sometimes we're convinced of things, we're totally convinced of things, and then later we realize we're totally wrong. That might have already happened. You know? I'm not sure that happens to Germans, but it happens to most people in the world, right? Yeah. So let's start to. I will now share my screen with you, and then you will see écran. There we go. 3, 2, 1, and off we go. Okay. Now we will see this here. Okay. So now what you see here is you see, first you don't see a lot, but you will very quickly see something. So St. Thomas Aquinas was one of the greatest philosophers and theologians of all times, a very logical thinker who analyzed God, the world, man, through questions he asked. So by analyzing the human, he was obviously an Italian, right? Italian and philosophers goes pretty well. Actually, Germans and French also, so they're good too. But he was, as a matter of fact, Italian. He was a Dominican monk and had lots of time to think. And in his case, his thinking was well invested time. So what I'd like to see with you now is that according to him, the human person has supernatural faculties and natural faculties. Why? Because we are a spirit that is incarnate, a spirit that lives in a body, or a body that is attached to a spirit. Spirit and body belong together, and we see that when a person dies, the person doesn't want to die, and it's a big, big struggle because they belong together. We're not like other religions who believe that we're a spirit that is caught in a body and that is unhappy in a body because the body is bad and makes us sin, and so we have to get rid of the body. No, we're Christians. Christians don't believe that. Christians believe that the body is good, although the body is wounded, but we'll see that right now, but the body is deeply good, and that the body and the spirit belong together, and the body and the spirit have to learn to choose what is good. You have many other philosophies and religions that say, no, the spirit has to free itself from the body so as to reunite to the oneness of spirit or God. And we believe that this is not the case. We believe that our spirit and our body belongs together, and they will always belong together. We even believe that our spirit does separate from the body at death, but that our body still belongs to a spirit, and that we don't want to be up there or, either just without a body, because we need to hug and we need to look at and we need to laugh and we need to cry of joy, and we can't imagine life after without that. It just doesn't work. No, it's what makes life beautiful, and it's what allows us to express what we have inside. You have other religions that say, well, no, the spirit then frees itself of the body, and if it was evil, it has to go in a lower body, and if it was good, it goes in a better body. But can you imagine yourself in the body of somebody else? Like, frankly, no. And then once you get up there and all is over, like, which body is yours? Kind of strange. Anyway, so we believe that we have a spirit that is incarnate and that begins to exist in the moment of our conception. Now, let us look at these faculties, natural faculties. So we have first a faculty that we call conscience. Our conscience, sorry, nonsense. Conscience somewhere else. Sorry, I was not attentive. We have the instinct. The instinct tells us how to survive. The instinct tells an animal, for example, how much it should eat, how much it should drink, how much it should sleep or rest, how to reproduce itself. The instinct tells this to the animal, and the animal will always act coherently. You will never see, for example, a donkey drinking too much water, right? Or a rabbit eating too many carrots. He will eat what he needs and then he will withdraw. You will never see a blackbird using wrong his sexual faculties of reproduction. The blackbird will use this in the moment that corresponds in the year, full stop, no more. And nature organizes that because the blackbird cannot think. You will never see a roe deer or I don't know, or a fish sleeping too long. But you do see humans sleeping too long or too little. In your age, normally too little. You do see humans using wrong their capacity of eating or drinking. You see humans eating too much or too little or wrong. You see humans drinking too much or too little. That's rather seldom. Or the wrong stuff and too much of the wrong stuff. You see humans using their faculty of reproduction in a way that has nothing to do with reproduction. Well, in our case, it's meant for much more, but it's definitely not meant just to feel good. It's much greater than that, right? An animal would never do that. Why? Because an animal is directed by nature. We would say the creator has put an instinct in the animal so that the animal doesn't have to think. And the instinct tells the animal exactly the right amount of how to eat, how to drink, how to reproduce, how to rest. We humans are free. So we have to learn to choose freely what is good by listening to our heart and trying to understand what is good for the human person. Normally, we know it not that well when we think about ourselves. We know it very well once we have children and know what is good for them to sleep, to eat, how to use their faculties of reproduction or sexuality, and how to sleep. For your kids, you will know it perfectly well. For yourself, you don't know it that well. Strange, actually, no? So sometimes kids help us to understand what we actually know, what is true, and about ourselves, we say, yeah, more or less, we figure it out. Okay, so the instinct tells the animal what is good and what is bad, and the animal does it. Then the animal, and we also have passions. Now the passions are like the strength, they are like powers that you have inside, like the power of a horse to work or to pull a horse car, for example, no? The power of a leopard or a bear to catch or kill animals or fish or whatever, or an antelope or a gazelle, so as to feed its kids. So the passions are super strong strengths that God has put in the human person so as to power and to work until the end. In your case, for example, so as to work to be able to feed a family, right? But sometimes we can use these passions to go too long, too far, or we can use these passions and they can domain us instead of we using them for what is good. not always so clear, right? So an animal will never use passions in the wrong way. And we can use the power of passions in the wrong way or for the wrong purpose, or they can escape us. And we'll understand later why they can escape us. In God's plan, this was not like that. In God's plan, the passions would obey the higher faculties. They were good, they are useful, and they're always good and useful in God's plan, but they have to obey a certain logic and a certain order. Then there's a very beautiful set of faculties that we call the feelings. Feelings are very powerful in us. Like gratitude, admiration, fidelity, affection towards somebody, tenderness, all these beautiful feelings that can draw us closer to a person. For example, when you have a grandfather and your grandfather is very sick. I remember my grandfather when he was very sick, and I stayed at this place for a few days because he was alone. And I slept in the room next to him. And in the night or in the morning, I'm not sure, he called me and he was in the bathroom and he had kind of dropped into the toilet. And like, you know, to touch your own grandfather and he was half naked and pull him out of the toilet, it's normally like everything inside you says, oh, especially if you're a boy, you know, you don't want to see, don't want to touch, don't want to, it's so different than what you think of. But the gratitude and the admiration I had for him and the tenderness I felt towards him just made me say, of course I do, full stop. It's like no question. But the feelings is something beautiful that can really help you to go much further than your reason maybe would want. But feeling can also really go in the wrong direction, and you can keep hard feelings even if something is long time past already. We'll come to that right away, why this happens. But feelings are principally good, necessary, and a great support for our coherence of life. Now we go to the supernatural faculties. Supernatural faculties, we have one faculty that corresponds, so to say, to the instinct, and that is what we said before already, the conscience. The conscience is a faculty that tells us what to do. What is good, what is bad. It doesn't tell us why, it just tells us what. It tells us how to react. Like when there's a danger, boom, go away. No? When a child is in danger, go and jump for it. No? When there is an opportunity, go for it. No? When we see somebody who suffers, help him. But it doesn't tell us why. So the conscience tells us what. The conscience normally works, although we can manipulate it. We can make agreements and say, well, for example, let's say something silly, no? I know I shouldn't drink more than this, but I can say, yeah, but it doesn't really matter because I can control it. So I already made a pact with my conscience not to accuse me, not to remind me who I am, not to remind me what is good. In that moment, I start to manipulate myself, which is going to become a problem for all the others, especially if you get married. All wrong choices that you do become a problem for all the others in your family. Okay, so the kind of father or mother you will be one day that is driven also and manipulated or influenced by the choices you take. So we can make pacts with our conscience, or we can say, my conscience tells me my spouse needs time with me, and I feel that I should work more. I feel that, and my passions tell me that, but my conscience tells me clearly, if you continue working like that, you might put in danger your couple. And I say, yeah, but it's good because, I mean, we have to work in whatever reasons. I mean, you find at least 5 reasons why it's good what you want, because you always find reasons to do what you want to do. And you can manipulate your conscience, and you can manipulate it forever. And not be able anymore to realize what is actually really good and not. And that's no joke. I mean, that's the person you're going to be, and that's the one who's going to be the mother or the father of your children. and the spouse of your spouse. Okay, so conscience, handle with care, learn to obey it, okay? Not blindly, and therefore we get a second faculty up there in the supernatural faculties, which is our reason. The reason tells us why. Okay? Conscience is what, reason tells us why. Now, reason tells us why I should do something, or why I should work more, or why I should stop working now, why I should drink more because it's okay, or why I should stop drinking, why I should sleep a little bit more, or take care that my spouse can sleep a bit more, or why I should get up in the morning instead of being lazy, you know? Or why I should take more time to listen to my spouse, or to discuss, or to do nice things, or why, you know, why I should act differently. The reason is very useful and very important, so as to know. I see a beggar, for example, my conscience tells me, go, he needs help. You get closer, you smell the alcohol from far away, and you say, well, maybe no, because it's not good. Or you see you offer a sandwich and he takes it, and you say, okay, I can't even give him money. Here's a reason tells us why. And now we have a third supernatural faculty, that is the will. The will is key, okay, super important. The will seems not that important because it's just, yeah, with willpower, we'll get things done, but the will is super important because in your conscience, you see what you have to do. In your reason, you see why you have to do it, but you can perfectly know what you have to do, see it with your reason, and never do it. Confer, taking a couple of time, confer, taking time for prayer, or for taking time for your parents, or sharing your means with somebody who has less, or forgiving somebody instead of keeping anger. You might see that it's good, and you might know why it's good. You can even explain it to others, but in your case, no. Or you might know that you should stop drinking, and you know even why you should stop drinking, but you just take one more and one more and one more. So we need the will which helps us to choose. Super important, okay? Okay, capacity of choosing. Otherwise, I just stay a rack in a way. So, okay, we stay here. And basically what's important is this order here, okay? That we always keep this order, not this order, but this order, okay? The instinct and the passions, for example, when they tell me or suggest to me what the reason and the conscience consider as good, then go and follow your passions. When your feelings tell you something and suggest something to you that is in accordance with reason and conscience, go for it. But when your feelings tell you, no, I feel angry, so I have the right to be angry, or he hit me, so I'm allowed to hit back according to my strength. And my reason tells me, no, no, because then you hurt the other person. And if you say this word now, well, this word will remain in the heart of the other person. So don't do it. And my feeling tells me, yes, but I have the right and I need to, and boom, out it comes. And off it goes. So feelings and passions, go for it if they correspond to what your conscience and your reason suggest to you. But if they don't, well, they have to learn to obey and to follow the order and the indications of conscience and reason. Okay? So that is, in the beginning of creation, a normal thing, but for some reason, this doesn't always work. Why doesn't it always work? Okay. Why do sometimes the feelings and passions suggest something to me that is totally contrary to conscience and reason? So we'll try to understand this right now and go one step further, and we'll see here. Okay, we'll see this here. You don't see a lot yet, but you will see very soon. So what do we see here? We see, I will explain to you basically the image number one I'm telling you what we're going to look at the Bible now. And the Bible is a book that has all different kinds of knowledge inside. The Bible has, for example, some books that are historical. You have some books that are poetical books. Poetic books. And you have some books that are symbolic books. Now, you might say, fair enough, but I don't need symbolic books because I just need scientific and historical absolute truth. But what's important for you to know is that mankind during thousands of years did not at all think in that logic. They said, for example, when the Bible was written in the Old Testament, or rather transmitted orally and then much later written, the purpose was not at all giving a scientific or a one-to-one precise historical scientific explanation of what happened. It was simply not the intention. The intention was to explain what life is about, where man comes from, who is God, who is man, where does evil come from, what is man's mission in the world, how does the human person function, why are there contradictions sometimes inside, okay? So the Old Testament does not have the purpose to be scientific, no. Nevertheless, the poetic and symbolic books, you can say, well, then I don't need them. I just need historic and scientific precision. That would be very poor because that would mean you don't need poems, you don't need paintings, you don't need music, you just need basically instructions and historic scientific books. That would be a very poor world, right? You would never write love letters. You would just explain that in me there's a chemical thing happening that draws me towards you. That's pretty romantic. So, first of all, historical books, yes, we have them in the Bible. For example, the whole New Testament, specifically the 4 Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles, are historical books. They were written within the years after the death of Christ, when hundreds and thousands of eyewitnesses were still alive. That's very important for us. They were not written 200-300 years later according to what fitted to the church. No, the first manuscripts that are found are just from a few years after the death of Christ, maybe the year 50 or 60. That's super important because that means there are real witnesses, and we can consider these books as truly what happened, a truly historical sequence. They are slightly different one to the other because they tell the same story, but addressing a different public. Okay, good. So historical books. So we have them. Some books of the Old Testament have historical elements. Some books, like Exodus, has some historical elements. But the historical is not the most important reality in that book. Then you have the Chronicles, you have the Book of Kings. There are many books that have a lot of historical elements, but not only. Then you have poetic books, books of wisdom, for example. The Book of Wisdom, which is one of the most beautiful books in the Bible, that tells a lot about how to know things with your heart, how to see when you look at a person, not just what your eyes see, but actually try to participate in what the Creator sees when he looks at your husband or your wife. He sees more than you. He doesn't see just a moment, but he sees the whole history of this person. He sees, it's like when you see the Tiber, no? the Tiber, or what's the river that goes through Zurich or through Paris, it's the Seine, right? When you see the Seine, I go here to the Seine and I look at it, I see it's pretty dirty. And I say, what a dirty river. Now, when God looks at the river, he says, sorry, can you come up here and zoom out? I will tell you why this river is dirty. This river was actually totally pure and crystal pure when it started. But then many other rivers went inside and it made it little by little also dirty. Okay. Well, the same thing happens with us. We're totally pure, but then we experienced feelings, and we experienced wounds, and we experienced some elements of wrong education, we experienced traumatisms, we experienced joy, we experienced great friends and bad friends. We did great things and huge mistakes, and all of that is part of our life. So when today your spouse or your fiancé says or does something that surprises you, God will say, come here and explain why this happens. See, because I know your fiancé. You know a little bit of him or of her. I know him from the beginning until the end. And you know what? I know him or her even until in eternity, when everything that is human in us or poor will be penetrated by everything that is divine in God. So God sees all of that. And by seeing all of that, actually, his way of looking at my spouse or fiancé is much more a look of justice than my looking at you that probably sees a mistake or a bad habit or whatever. Okay, so it's important to see the Creator sees the whole thing. And wisdom is a participation in what the Creator sees. Okay? So you would want that. And you can actually have that by simply asking God, give me wisdom. It's as simple as that. God is not complicated. We are complicated because we don't believe it. He's very simple. You do that and you get it. Okay? So poetic books. Poetic books are also the Psalms. Beautiful. 150 Psalms that are basically a school of prayer and of how to turn to God and how to direct yourself to God and what to ask for. For example, they explain to you that to God, you don't have to tell him, listen, I did this and this and that, so now you have to bless me. The Psalms rather tell you, God, I'm poor and I'm weak and I'm sad, but I know that you promised me to be a faithful God and to be with me. So show me that you're faithful. No? Remember your word, remember your promises, remember your fidelity to my ancestors. That's a good way of praying. I don't have to say, I did that, or I didn't do it, so I don't deserve that you love me. No? It's like a kid telling his mother, well, I didn't deserve food because I got a bad mark in school. The mother will say, you're crazy. You get food not because you have a good mark, but because you're my child, for example. Right? Okay, poetic books, they're necessary. And symbolic books are books that don't tell us, basically historical events, but they tell us stories. And these stories tell us, for example, the book of Job is a book that tells us about the meaning of suffering. Very interesting book. The book of Tobit tells us about the meaning of human love and also even sexual love. The book of Genesis, Adam and Eve and the Ark of Noah and the Tower of Babel and all of that. Well, they don't want to tell you a scientific story. They want to tell you who is God, who is man, where does evil come from, and how does God save us, and how does God commit to us, and how does God guide us, and how we have to interact with him. So if you see them in that perspective, they're actually very useful. Right? So that's like saying of Napoleon, you have books about him, history books, you have poems about him, and you have paintings of him. You can say, I don't need a painting, but a painting, a Napoleon painting of the painter David in your house is a good thing, right? So, and it tells you something that the poem can't say or that the history can't say. So we need all of that. Like we need different ways of thinking, a couple. Maybe one of the two of you is more rational and the other one of you is more poetic or more creative or more artistic. But you can't say, well, your way of thinking is stupid or doesn't lead us anywhere, because it's just, imagine that your kids just have your way of thinking. That would be just too poor. Okay? So you need both, and both is good. It's beautiful to make team. Okay, so we continue. Picture number 2. Basically, what I want to show you here is that the human person is a person of relations. Now we go into the book of Genesis and the story of Adam and Eve. As I tell you, the story of Adam and Eve is not a historical, scientific story, but it's a story that tells us about who is God, who is man, and how does this work and what happened. Okay, so you have Adam and you have Eve, and then later you have Cain and Abel, and then you have God. Okay, so the human person is a person that has relations. And the relations are between man and God. In the Bible, you see that by Adam and God walking in the garden together. There's a total original trust or harmony. Original harmony. So they're walking in the garden. God says to Adam, and Adam does what God says to him. Adam asks God, and God gives him what he asks for. So it's perfectly okay. There's harmony. There's no worry. There's no mistrust. Everything is in peace. Then you have another relation that is Adam towards himself. Adam towards himself is shown by the fact that Adam is naked, but doesn't feel the need to cover his nakedness. He's in peace with his nakedness, right? Different to ourselves, we are sometimes a bit uncomfortable with our own nakedness, right? So, but in the beginning, it was not like that, and that's super important. We see when God created man, there was total trust and harmony towards God. Our sexuality was not a problem for ourselves. Like it was not a cause of frustration or temptation or looking for our own pleasure. No, it was just there and it was fine. So there's no problem. And then you see the relation between Adam and Eve, or Adam and other humans, right? And this relation is shown by the fact, again, nakedness. Adam and Eve, they're lonely. They're naked, and they're not ashamed of one another. Okay, you see the moment when God creates Eve, and Adam sees Eve, and he shouts out of joy, and he realizes she is similar to me, because before you have all the different animals that God creates, because God says it's not good that man remains alone, not because man needs somebody else so as to not to be alone, but man needs somebody else so as to give himself to somebody, so as to be able to give himself, right? So we don't get married because I need somebody so as not to be alone, or I need somebody to feel good. If we get married for that, it's the wrong reason, okay? We get married because we want to learn how to love, we want to learn how to become a gift, and we want to learn how to receive somebody so that this somebody with us together can become a fullness of couple. Okay, that's what we want to aim for. So don't get married because you don't want to be alone. And don't get married because you want to feel good. And don't even get married because you want to be happy. Try to get married because you want to make somebody else happy, and together with this person become happy. But the goal is the other person, and you with the other person. You for the other person. Okay, that needs conversion. It's not only that, obviously also we want to be happy, that's normal. It would be strange not to want to be happy, but that's not the purpose that we should be looking for, because it's something natural for us. Okay, so make sure that once you get to the marriage day, that you have chosen that you want to make the other person happy, and the other person is more important for you than you for yourself. Okay, sounds simple, but it's not. And it's not, you will see right away why. Because in the beginning, that was normal. Like Adam and Eve would see one another, they would see their nakedness, and they would not feel ashamed. Very strange. Adam would see the nakedness of Eve, and Eve the nakedness of Adam, and they would not feel the need of running away, hiding, or covering themselves, or whatever, attacking one another, or no, they were just fine. And it says they were naked and they did not feel any shame. It's explicitly said in the Bible. So that means that something was completely healed, completely healthy. Try to imagine how beautiful it is, or it would be in a couple, when a couple in its nakedness can look at one another without any fear, without any wrong or strange desires mixed into the good desires. That's what we have to aim for, and that's what we have to fight for. But that you can't completely arrive there without the Creator. But in the beginning, it was like that, okay? What's important is that we say, when God created man and woman, or mankind, he created them good and capable of this being a gift for the other person and receiving the other person fully without wanting something from me. Adam and Eve saw in their bodies we're made to be a gift for one another. I a gift for you. We're made for communion. I want to be with you to complete you. And we're made for life. It's obvious that we're made for life. It would be crazy not to believe that, right? Okay. So in the beginning, everything was good, right? So we go to picture number 3. That's the garden. The garden with the trees, and one tree is different. In the book of Genesis, you see that the garden, the paradise, so to say, has all these trees, and God says to Adam, Adam, you can take of all the trees that you want of the garden, except the truth, the tree of knowledge and of good and evil. Okay, he doesn't say that it's evil, the tree. He just says of that tree you will not take. Now Adam can say, listen, God, for me it's enough that you tell me that I should not, and I won't even ask why. But Adam could also say, well, because you don't allow it, I even want it. But in the beginning, everything was good. Why does God tell him you can take of all the trees except that one? Why does God do that? Why does God say, yes, 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 but don't do that? Does he do it to test them? He might do it to test them. Does he do it because he doesn't love them? Well, obviously not. I believe he does that so as to give to Adam the capacity of choosing. Because if everything is okay, you don't have to exercise the capacity of choosing. Then you can't exercise your freedom, right? Imagine as a couple, when the girl says to the guy, listen, we can do lots of things, but please don't ask me to do this or to do that, okay? I don't feel comfortable with that. And the guy says, listen, because I love you, I won't even ask you why. It's enough for me to know that it's important for you not to do that. How beautiful. Or to say, well, no, but I want that. How poor would that be, right? So, but then you see freedom. When a girl says to a guy, you can do whatever you want, it's not even nice for the guy and it's not even nice for the girl, because we need to learn to exercise our freedom. And we can only do it when we have the option of not loving or of not following or of not trusting. So God, so as to teach us how to use our freedom, he has to offer us the possibility of disobeying. He has to offer us the possibility of saying to God, no, I don't choose what you tell me. He has to offer you the possibility of not following your conscience, of not following your reason, of just following your passions. And we have that possibility, right? So now let's see. So that is clear. And now the devil comes, the snake or the monster comes to Eve and says, Eve, is it true that God said you are not allowed to take of any of the trees? Not allowed to take of any of the trees. And Eve says, no, that's wrong. On the contrary, God said we can take of all the trees, okay? Very clear decision of conscience and reason. She remembers God said you can take of any of the trees except that one. So the devil said you can't take of any of the trees, typical temptation. It's like a guy who says, I get married, I will never be able to do this and that anymore. No, stupid. No, you can do so many things, but of course you have to renounce to certain things. Okay. So very clear conscience and reason. No, we may take of all of the trees, just not of the tree of good and evil. Okay. So the devil withdraws and comes back again and says, yes, honey, but that's the one you want. Okay, that's the best. And God only said you can't take from it because he's jealous, because he knows that if you take from it, then you become like him and you will decide over good and evil. and you will not die. It's not true. God said you will die, but it's not true. Okay, big lie, because we do die. True, we will decide over good and evil, but unfortunately, we will decide what is good and what is evil without listening to God. And that's what we see nowadays when we use sometimes, like on the one side, we say how horrible there is sexual abuse, but on the other side, the government does zero against pornography. And say, oh, how strange is that, right? It's actually ridiculous, no? And the government says, well, you have to protect, you have to lock down a whole country because there's a few thousand people that die, but there's as many people who die of smoking, and the government does almost zero, no? The government says we have to protect the eldest and the weakest, especially and first and foremost. It's beautiful to say that. But at the same time, the government passes a law so that we can kill old people. Now, how logical is that? Okay, but then we see the brutal incoherence and the wordings without reason, just emotional talking that today leads society sometimes. I don't say that the government shouldn't protect us. Obviously, it should. It should protect us of many, many other things before. And they should have done a lockdown so as to search how to turn off pornography 50 years ago or 30 years ago. It never happened. Money, right? They could have done the same thing with drugs. Never happened. Money. Could have done the same thing with cigarettes. Never happened. Money. Okay? Whatever. Okay, maybe they want to make up nowadays. We don't know. Okay, so the devil comes back and says, it's not true. God, you will not die. Well, yes. Okay, so what happens? The devil says, if you want to take up the tree, you will see it's going to be much better and you're going to enjoy. And the next phrase in the Bible, in Genesis, says, and Eve saw that the fruit was delicious, and she felt the desire of taking. Okay, so in that moment, it's not anymore conscience and reason, but it's feelings and passions. So she just a moment ago chose with conscience and reason what to do and reject it. And the next moment, she feels an attraction and she says that it feels good and I want to and I feel like and my desires guide me, so I go for it. Okay. And that moment, something breaks apart. That moment, something breaks apart. Something breaks apart because the devil, that he could not avoid. There's a relation between God and the human person. And we see this here in the picture number 4. And you can imagine like an umbilical cord between the mother and the child. And what passes through the umbilical cord is food, is drinking, is oxygen, is affections, is hormones. All of that passes through the umbilical cord. Okay. So I imagine that between God and man, in the plan of God, original plan of God, there was like an umbilical cord that would make that divine life would come into us. Because if divine life comes into us, then we can use our life in the right way. If we have the life of God inside of us, then what comes out of us, out of our eyes, out of our mouth, out of our hand, and out of our sexuality is becoming a gift for the other person. Okay. So the more you have God inside, the more God comes out, and the more this body, this spirit, this intelligence will be used in the way best possible. Now, what happened is that the devil was jealous of this relation between God and man and wanted to separate man from God. He could not cut this relation. So what he did is he seduced man to draw away. And further away, right? And in that moment, you can see that this umbilical cord gets tense, and in the next moment, you have this umbilical cord that is ripped. And so the life of God does not fully come into the human person anymore. So there's something broke, and we feel the consequence, and we will see right away what that means. So what are the consequences of man having not trusted God, man having gone away from God? Like when you go away from a Wi-Fi, well, eventually you will not capture anymore, right? You will not have any more signal. It's as simple as that, right? or when you have a computer with a cable and you go away from the plug, well, eventually it's going to go out, right? Or when you have a heating, right? Electrical heating, and you cut the cable with a big knife, well, the heating will grow cold, and it can't heat itself up anymore. Okay, so that will happen to mankind. So how does this shown in the Bible? Very interesting. First thing, if you maybe remember your catechism from when you were a kid, one or the other of you, the first thing after they took, so Eve takes of the fruit, she eats, she gives it to Adam, who is with her. You can say, where was Adam when all of this happened? Because we can say, yeah, it was the fault of Eve, so to say, blah, blah. But Adam was actually just standing right next to her and didn't do anything, okay? Because he was afraid, because he was curious, because we don't know. The man had to act, and out of fear, he didn't act. Happens sometimes. So what's the first thing that happens when Adam eats? The Bible says the first thing, their eyes opened up and they realized they were naked. Okay. So the way of looking to themselves, not to the other yet, but to themselves, suddenly was different. There was something broke in the piece of looking at their own body and their own sexuality. Suddenly they were not at ease. So what do? They realize that they're naked and they hide away. So first they hide. That means there's something that broke here in their relation. So the harmony is broken. The original harmony in man itself. The next thing that happens, so they hide away because they hear that God is coming. They hide from God. Why would they hide from God? There's no need to hide from God, but they do. They do because they're afraid of God. Why would they be afraid of the one who gave them life? Why would they be afraid of the one who is always there for them? Why do people say when something happens, why did you allow that? Or how did I deserve it? Or why do you punish me? Or this had to happen. I was too happy, and obviously God would send me that suffering. God says, well, sorry, guys, I didn't send any suffering. No. Like we forget God during 20 years, and then when something happens to us and says, you were never there. Complicated. But so the mistrust that is there. So they hide away from God, and God says, where are you, Adam? He doesn't call Eve, which is interesting. We can say Eve took the fruit, but he calls Adam because Adam knows that he's in charge. Eve is in charge, so to say. The woman is in charge, you can say, of the love relation. She has to know when love is good and when love is not good. And she has to have the courage to say that. Right. You have to remember what you thought when you were a 12, 13, 14-year-old girl. What was your ideal? And then you know how to keep this ideal and have the courage to be faithful to your heart. You know, many times maybe, so as to please somebody, so as to say out of compassion almost to the other person, giving up your ideals. And that's not listening to your heart anymore and putting in danger any kind of relation. Like a woman needs to be faithful to her heart, otherwise she will be a bad guide. Okay? That can be relearned again. Now, Adam knows that he's not in charge of love or of life, but he's in charge of the family. And he knows he's the last responsible. It's not written anywhere, but there in the Bible, we see that God says, Adam, no, not Eve, Adam, why did you do that? Did you take of the fruit that I told you not to take of? And what does Adam say? What was Eve? The woman you gave me. Great, beautiful. It's her fault. It's always the other's fault, right? It's never our fault. It's normally at least as much the other's fault, and normally a bit more the other's fault in our ideas. Okay, so it was she gave me, the woman you gave me. So the original harmony is broken in all the levels. And we feel it in ourselves. For example, we feel that, could you write a piece of paper and says, God, from now on, you can do whatever you want from me, and you can allow whatever you want from me in my life, because I know you're good and I'm not afraid. I sign it and off you go. Not so clear. Yeah? We might be afraid that he would do something bad to us. Strange, weird fear. Instead of being afraid of the devil, we're afraid of that, right? Instead of being afraid of ourselves, we're afraid of God. Very strange. But we are. When we're lying in our bed and we know we should get up, and we say, no, I need 5 minutes more or I will die. Obviously, will not die, but I will be very unhappy if I don't have 5 minutes more. Sorry, that's just wrong. You don't need 5 minutes more. You need to get up. It's much better for you to get up quickly. Boom, quick shower, and off you go, because you will have more time for the others. You have more time to pray. You have more time to prepare. You have more time to do good, instead of just rolling around 5 minutes, which is not really necessary. Because sometimes it's good, sometimes it's healthy, but not always. I say, so when we say, no, if my conscience reminds me I have to get up now, and I say no, and I turn off the alarm and I take another time, then I'm basically telling my conscience, or I'm actually telling God, you are bad because you don't allow me to sleep longer. So I will take what I know is necessary for me, since you don't want me to be happy. And that's exactly what happened here. Okay? It's exactly what happened there. Eve said, God, you don't want me to be happy. I understood now. Okay, so I will have to take for myself what I need to be happy. Not good idea, right? Okay, so the original harmony is broken. In the relation with the others, for example, like it's not easy to trust 100% every person in the world, obviously. Not even people you know pretty well. To really trust them 100% needs courage. To basically give yourself completely in the hands of somebody needs courage. Maybe with your spouse, you trust your spouse 100%. There might be moments in your life when you will not. There might have been moments, if you maybe had another girlfriend or boyfriend, where you did not feel that trust anymore, and that's very painful. Okay, so we know what it means not to be able to trust 100%, or struggling with your trust, which actually is a choice, not a feeling. And then the struggle in the own personality, the lack of peace. We maybe don't like our voice. Normally when we tape something, we hear our own voice, we get very nervous because we say, oh, how horrible. We don't like a picture of ourselves when we do selfie. We always think we look horrible. Or we don't like our nose, or our ears, or our belly, or our body, or our eyes, or color of our hair, or something in us that we don't accept. We all have a kind of complex relation with our sexuality. We would like to be in peace, but sometimes it doesn't leave us in peace. Complicated. Okay, that's not because we're bad. That's because we're wounded, and that's not even our fault. That's because of this here. This broke, okay? Picture number 4. There's something that broke. And because that broke, we don't have the life of God in us. And if we don't have the Spirit of God and the love of God and the life of God and the peace of God in us, well, of course, we're not in peace, neither with ourselves nor with anyone in this world 100%. Picture number 5. That's why God tries to reconnect. If that is humanity, and humanity is relational, okay? So all the human persons, we can say, when I do something, it always has a consequence for others, right? When you, for example, when you come into the house of a person that is very generous, well, it will affect you. And it will make you want to be more generous. When you come into a house where people are very angry or critic, well, it might affect you. When you get married to somebody who has the habit of criticizing or of being jealous, then jealousy might enter into your family unless you work on it, right? So, but if you do good, it leaves good for generations. I know families, for example, that tell me about their great-grandparents. Their grandparents that was so good, and it just left peace in a family for generations. That's a beautiful heritage you want to give to your kids, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and generations afterwards. But that you have to work for. So we're all relational, and whatever we do has an impact on other persons. When you sit in your room all alone and you do something that you're not meant to do, whatever, you can say, well, I'm alone. It doesn't have consequence. Well, that's nonsense, because as a relational person, whomever you meet the next day will be affected in some way by that. And when you get married, like, forget it. Any choice you do that is bad will have a consequence for your spouse and for your children and for your grandchildren. But every good choice you take also has, okay? So learn choosing well. Now, the relation between God and mankind basically ripped, right, as we said. And so this cable, yeah, it ripped, and so mankind can't heat themselves up anymore. So basically what God did is he sent first he sent the patriarchs, he sent Abraham, and then Moses, so as to guide the people and to remind them of God. To remind them of God, right? And so the people would say, okay, we want to follow God. Yes, we forgot. Well, obviously, yes, we will. God gives Moses the 10 Commandments, and people say, we will always follow them. But just a little time later, they stop following him because it's difficult. Not because they're bad, but because it's difficult. It's difficult to follow the conscience. It's difficult when you're wounded. So what God does as next, he sends prophets. The prophets within the people, they remind the people what God wants. Prophets are very pure people. They're very pure in their heart. So they remind people what God wants. And the people follow them. And then after a while, they say, no, that's so difficult. And they were all killed, actually, if you look at the Bible. All the prophets were killed because they were annoying. People didn't want to hear them telling them, don't follow your passions, don't kill or be unjust. Follow your heart and do what is good. Yeah, but after a while, no, it's easier just to take my advantage. Okay. So finally, what happened is God says, okay, so what I'll do is I myself will become man and be among you. So I leave divinity, I abandon divinity, the Son comes down and becomes one of us. And so when he becomes one of us, basically he recreates in this way an attachment with the Creator, okay? So in him, there's a new attachment. He remains among us, but then eventually he is killed by us, pretty good, but we're able to. He's killed by us, and so he goes back towards the Father, but he remains among us through different elements. He remains among us through the church, through the Word of God, the Bible, so the story of him, through the sacraments, we'll talk about that right away. He remains among us where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, that means in community. He remains among us, that he makes a pact with us that every time we love, we do a selfless act of love, he's there. Okay, so basically he remains in the church and throughout Christianity and also in the other religions in a way that try to follow their heart. Okay, so when we are close to God, when we're close to Jesus, then actually we reestablish the relation to God, and the life of God can come into us. So basically through baptism, when a person is baptized, and this person comes from outside, and in the moment the person is baptized, the person enters, so to say, into this network of life and receives the whole power that comes from Christ and it comes from God. Okay. Basically, that's yeah, the main idea about that. So let's now go back to this image here, and let's see what is now important for us. Is that what you see in front of you? You see subconscious reason, will, feelings, passions, instincts, the human person capable of doing good in a very simple way from the very beginning, but then something ripped, as we said. And so what happens now, many times we don't follow first our conscience and our reason, but we first follow our feelings and our passions. I see that sometimes when I have moments where I pray with the kids in primary school here in Saint-Jean-de-Passy, I say, okay, after the prayer, you can come and I will give each one of you a little card with a picture of a saint or of a cross or of Mary, whatever. And let's say there are 30 kids, and I tell them, I have 50 pictures, they're all the same, don't worry, you don't have to rush, just come and take it easy, and everyone will get one. Okay, you don't have to push it, but you can tell them they can't. Like, out of 30 kids, maybe 2 will stand there and wait, as you told them, and 28 will push and, I want this picture, and will squeeze one another and hands over hands. Why? Because feelings and passions are very strong, right? Because of this here, very strong. And so many times, the first thing that reacts in us are the passions and the feelings and the instincts, and the conscious reason, not always. By the way, the will is blind, okay? That means the will does not see. The will do whoever shouts louder, right? So when the conscience and reason shout louder, then the will can do what is good. When the feelings and the passions shout louder, well, then the will is eventually going to follow what the passions and the feelings want, but not what is good. Okay. Now, how can that broken nature, where the supernatural faculties sometimes are kind of exchanged in order, how can this be in a way reestablished? Okay, so we have man before the fall in the plan of God. You have man after fall that is broken and mainly ruled and domained by his passions and feelings and instincts, which is not good, right? And then we have redemption. So God comes, draws close to us, like when a child is lost and is panicking or is sick, and mommy comes and takes the child in the arms, and the child is calm, it calms down. And the mother maybe doesn't even do anything, and it can't make that the wound doesn't hurt, but the mother is just there, or the father, and hugs the child, and the child is fine. But basically, we can say the coming of God in Jesus Christ is God hugging humanity and giving us peace again. Now, when we need to have access to God in this world, how do we need that? How do we do that? How do we, because we need God to be close to us so as to basically enlighten or repair our conscience that might be, confused, enlighten our reason, strengthen our will, and then heal our feelings, order our passions, and order our instincts. God can do all of that because he's creator, right? So the only question for us is really, where can I find him securely? Where can I find God in a safe way? And that's what we want to see now. So very simply, I chose here 5 points that you can go for, 5 points, or you will surely find God. The first one is prayer. That seems the most obvious one. Although prayer is something that you have to relearn as adults, because prayer is not what it maybe was as a kid. What is important for you is that in prayer is not important so much what you say, but that prayer is a door opener that allows God to enter into you, right? So, and it doesn't even have to be a very good prayer. It's just a time that you give to God in silence, where you even contemplate nature, or you praise God for the beauty of a sunset, or of a beautiful rainy morning, or of a snowy mountain, or of seeing road ears on the fields. That is also prayer, right? Or thanking God for life and for freedom and for whatever. Okay. So prayer is the first. It's a safe door. When you pray, when you do the sign of the cross, or when you say an Our Father, or when you just say, God, I open my heart to you, he comes, even if you don't do it very well. So it's a safe door, okay? The next one is the Bible, or the Word of God. So when you open the Bible, it does something in you. Little story I tell you. In Geneva, there was a guy, an American that I knew, a Jew. He was a Jew, and I met him, and he wanted to know more about the Catholic faith. And so eventually he said, I would like to read the Bible, because he had never read it, because his father was Jewish and his mother was Catholic, but his father, they were both not practicing, and his father did never teach him anything about the Torah. And what he always told me is that his father did very bad things to him when he was young, and that he could never forgive his father. He never told me what. That was 15 years ago, so it was before all this time of abuse. So I don't know what he meant. But he always, every time I met him, I said, I can't forgive my father. So it must have been something pretty powerful. Now, he started reading the Bible. And I'm telling you this because the Bible has two effects. The Bible has an effect of informing your intelligence by giving you knowledge, but also has a faculty of transforming your way of thinking, of judging, etc., because it's Word of God. When Jesus says to the paralyzed man, get up, he doesn't say, oh, that's interesting. You just told me to get up, so that means I could actually probably do that. But he actually gets up because the Word of God has two effects. When God says light is created, the world is created, man is created. So it's not just said and it remains a saying, it actually happens. And in that same way, actually, the Bible, when you open it, it has an effect on you. So this friend of mine, he started reading, and a few months later, he told me, hey, Father Paul, you know what? I can now forgive my father. I said, what? My goodness, what happened? Or which chapter, or which book, or which phrase did you read that made you change? And he said, you know, Father Paul, the funny thing, it's not a specific phrase that I read. It's just I realized by reading the Bible, my way of thinking changes, my way of judging changes, my way of remembering changes, and I can now forgive. I don't know why. Okay, very powerful. But it also happened to me, like these things, you don't find them written in books. So I learned that after, well, I was a very young priest, just a few years. And I didn't know that, see? Or I accompanied people who were not believing in God, but they wanted to believe in God. And I read with them the Bible, a psalm, and they would tell me, why does this give me so much hope? And I said, good question. I think because the one who inspired that psalm and the one who lives in your heart are the same. Okay, so there's a resonance inside. So the Bible is not just a nice book with information inside. The Bible is alive. You try to open it with that attitude, and you will realize very quickly what that means. Okay, so it's a safe door. When you don't know what to do, you open the Bible, and you will find answers. You will find peace. Promise. Promise. Okay, this works, as the Americans say, or money back. Or money back. Okay, third door that you can open so as to encounter God, so that He can enlighten your reason, strengthen your will, heal your person, are the sacraments. We'll speak about them later in the next conference. Sacraments. Okay, the sacraments, we'll speak about them later, but basically they are safe doors like the baptism, communion, confirmation, confession, anointing of the sick, priesthood, and marriage are sacraments. And when you practice them, when you approach them, you actually know with certainty that God will do something in you. He will give you something of Him. What will He give you? He will put His Spirit back in you. Okay? He will reconnect this year. He will reconnect what is ripped in picture number 4, okay? So Sacraments, they put again the life of God into us, okay? They're not automatic. It means it's not because you're baptized once, then God lives forever in you. No, we realize we're like a slightly broken clay pot, and so it always runs out a little bit. Or it's like a garden that when you water it once, well, yeah, it's nice, but it's not enough. You have to water it regularly, depending on where you live. Okay. Then there's 2 other doors that I would offer you. One is the door of community. Not sure if that were 1 M or 2, but it doesn't matter. Community. Community, that means when you spend time with other couples that try to fight for being good couples, when you try to spend time with people who believe in God and who try to help one another to be good children of God, actually God is there. I mean, he comes. It's a safe door. You will receive from them. Like now, in this moment, we are 5 persons in communion, and we experience that things in our hearts start to click, and we start to understand ourselves better. And in a way, this begins little by little to make sense. So community is always a good thing. A couple that is alone is a couple in danger. Okay, a couple surrounded by good couples is a safe couple. Okay, a couple that prays together stays together, as Mother Teresa says, right? So community, in some way, community. And then the last element is charity. Charity, not in the American or British sense. I give $100 for charity, right? And I can deduce it from tax. No, charity rather in the sense of doing an act of charity, forgiving somebody, receiving somebody, being kind to somebody, being patient. Whenever you do one of these things, or even if you give a caress, but you don't hug the other person for yourself because you feel like doing that now for yourself, but you do that because you realize the other person needs that right now. That's a pure act of charity. The other one is an act of whatever you want to call it. If you hug the other person for yourself, it's good to learn to realize the distinction, because therefore I have to learn what you actually need to feel loved. And it's not necessarily what I need to feel loved. So when you do an act of charity, God comes. Maybe you've heard of the phrase, ubi caritas et amor Deus ibi est. There's a song, ubi caritas et amor Deus ibi est. Where there's charity, where there's love, there is God. So when you live an act of charity, God commits to be there. So prayer, the Bible, sacraments, community, and charity are safe doors that when you open them, God comes. And when he comes, then he heals your nature and fills you up again with his life. And that's what you need so that you can follow the order of conscience, reason, will, feelings, passions, and instinct. Okay, last thing here that I want to see with you in this session is where in all of that is love. Okay, love is a big word, right? Love is all you need, says somebody, and most of the songs in history that were written about love, but there's very different ideas about what love is. So it's important for us to know what the love is that you're going to promise, because you can say there's the love of the cat towards the mouse. Okay, that's not the kind of love you're going to promise, and it's not the kind of love that the mouse enjoys. Okay, you can have the kind of love that an Italian mother has towards her son. That's a nice kind of love, but it's maybe a kind of, it could be a possessive kind of love. Oh, sorry for saying Italian, it could be somebody else also. You can have the love of a 17-year-old boy telling the 16-year-old girl, I love you, so come and let's have sex together. I'm not sure what that kind of love is, but that's not the kind of love you're going to promise. Or the kind of love where the girl says to the guy, or the guy says to the girl, my goodness, I love you so much because I have such strong feelings for this. And now they say, in France, they say, j'ai des sentiments pour toi. Okay, you have feelings for the other person, that's nice, but you can't promise to have feelings. You can promise to love. So what does love mean? So there's the love that we experience when we fall in love. That happens, I would say, mainly here, okay, between feelings, passions, and maybe instincts. But you can't promise to have feelings. No, you can't promise, I will always love you in the sense of I always feel good. And many people, when they say, I promise to love you all days of my life, they kind of think inside of them, this means I will always have good feelings, because they can't imagine I will not have those feelings, which is as ridiculous as, I don't know what. I mean, it's like it has never happened in history, so why would it suddenly happen? It can be grace, but that's not something you're going to promise, okay? Or you feel a great passion towards the other person and you will always fight them. I will always fight for you. I will always be there for you. Well, why do half of the couples get married? And of the other half, again, half of them are kind of lukewarm. And then you have some very good couples. Well, it seems not to be automatic. So Thomas Aquinas says, love is between will and reason. Now, why between will and reason? Why between will and reason? Why is that love? Okay, so the will is because you choose the other person. So I love you means I choose you and I choose your happiness and I choose your fullness and I choose you before me and I choose to be next to you whenever you need me. That's a pretty strong promise, but you can promise it. You can't promise to feel good when you hold the other person's hand, but you can promise to hold the other person's hand when the other person needs it. You can't promise that you always feel sexually attracted to the other person, but you can promise to make sure that the other person is sexually in peace or is effectively in peace or feels safe. You can't promise to always feel attracted to the other person, but you can promise to give the other person whatever the person really needs, not the caprice, but what the person really needs. Okay. But for that, you need reason. Why? Because you need to understand what the other person needs to feel loved. Okay. So why do I do that? Okay. I'm able to choose you, but I have to know why I choose you and what do I promise. That means I need reason because, for example, if you give a bonsai tree to if you receive a bonsai tree and you can say, okay, what do you do with this right now? Should I put cold water, hot water, no water? Should I put it in the sun, in the shade? Should I put it outside, inside? Should I have no idea. So you look on internet, oh, look at it. Okay, I wouldn't have known. Okay, in the shade, little water, but whatever. I have no idea. Okay. So to say, if you want to love, promise love to a bonsai, you better know what that bonsai needs. And he might not need the same as you. A bonsai don't need big burger, okay? A bonsai don't need to sleep long on Sunday and get breakfast in bed from the husband. No, bonsai doesn't need that. But a wife might need that, no? Or a husband might need every now and then a good movie or a good soccer match with a big burger and not to have to talk in that moment, to be concentrated on what's really important, which is that match, right? Which you might say, okay, humanly, it's maybe ridiculous. Yes, but we're humans. We have feelings and we don't just need supernatural stuff, we also need human stuff. So when you promise to love somebody all the days of your life, then you promise to take care of this person and to know what this person needs to feel loved by you. Okay? You don't promise to feel good. You promise to make this person feel good, and you will do everything to do that. It's very different. Okay, so that's the love you're going to promise, and that's a big promise. Okay, and try to promise that without God. Have fun, and that's why you do this in church, because you can't promise actually to do that all your life. Because how many times have you already promised all kinds of things and maybe not completely fulfilled it? Okay. Therefore, I want to, show this little list of you here. That you could do together. I will send this right away to you then, the list that these few pictures so that you have them with you. That you could do this little exercise together. For example, you can say, okay, okay, each one of you prints that out and fills it in for both. Okay, what I enjoy humanly in the domain of culture. For example, maybe for you, theater is super important. Maybe for me, you know, what you call it, Netflix is super important. But we might not have the same taste, but I'm promising to make you happy. So I make sure if you love theater, although I don't enjoy it, but in my agenda, every now and then I put it in. And if I see you really down, I say, you know what, I bought tickets for theater tomorrow. Well, why don't we do? Yeah, but you have a big thing that you want to, yeah, but we are married, you see. So you are number one now, not my job. Okay, obviously, because if my job stays number one, well, then get married to your job, but don't get married to a man or a woman, okay? Now, food, okay, well, for me, maybe it's super important that we go to a nice little restaurant, and food is not that important, but where we are is important. Okay, well, for me, maybe I love big burger that is dropping fat on my pants and it all comes out. Okay, well, if that is important for you, and if I see you down, or a big pizza, well, I will make sure that you get a nice pizza with stuff on it that's not healthy, but it makes you happy, right? Because we're human, okay? Because if I don't take care of it, you will take care of yourself and you will look for your own pleasure. And that's not good. It's not good. If we start looking for our own pleasure and not for the one of the other, then we put the other one in big danger. Music, sports, and make sure that you find common ground, obviously, or to build common ground, to learn a sport that you enjoy both, because it takes time, to find food that you enjoy both, to find cultural moments that you enjoy both, to find music that you enjoy both, because you have to construct your common heritage, okay? Family, how much family, how little family, okay? Affectivity, what helps you most to feel drawn to you and to be affective to you? Okay, sexuality. Well, what do I feel comfortable with? Where do I want to be kissed, or how do I want to be touched? It's maybe very different to yourself, right? And maybe what's important so is to get there, and for you, it's rather what can I give you once I got. We're very different. So it's to make sure I want to promise to take care of your needs and not of my own needs. Very different. Okay, spirituality. Okay, for me, maybe it's important that we go to church together, that we pray together, that we read a good spiritual book together, that we have a spiritual conversation together. Maybe for me, not at all, but if it's important for you, well, then it's important for me because I'm getting married to you, right? We're going to become one. So how could not be important for me what's important for you? If I don't feel drawn to that, well, then because I love you, I want to learn to love what you love, right? So I'm doing a promise to you to make sure that to be with you in what is important for you. What most relaxes me, okay? You can say what most relaxes me is just to sit in front of a TV screen and not say anything. Could be. Or for me, for example, personally, for me, when I'm stressed, what really relaxes me is either I go on the roof of our parish here and I read Lord of the Rings, right? Or if I can go off for 1 or 2 days to the sea in Normandy and just see the waves or the sunset, it's just perfect. And I completely calm down, okay? What most stresses me, okay? And like, I have to make sure that I take care of what relaxes the other person and I avoid and defend the other person on what most stresses, or when we are in that situation that I can take care of you, okay? And the total no-goes when we're alone, or the total no-goes when we're with others. Okay, don't correct me in front of others, okay? Or please admire me in front of others, or please put your arm around me when we're together with other people because I want them to see that we belong together. Write it down. Write it down before. Tell the other one before, because you're doing a promise and the other one is doing a promise. So make sure that the other one knows what's important for you and that you become the biggest expert in what is important for the other person. Okay, so for this moment and for this conference, we'll leave it here. And I will now stop the taping. Sorry. First I'll do this here, and then we'll go back here, and then we will do this here.